Okay, so with this movie, Marlon Brando's name is Terry Malloy. And from here, Marlon Brando wanted to talk about dualities. I think a core of this movie is dualities, but he wanted to talk about that he's both sides. And Terry, just like Terry is kind of like a guy's name and a girl's name, he wanted to present that he is both masculine and feminine at the same time. It's a word that wasn't really around in the 50s. It's gender fluid. And he wanted to project that. He didn't really think he pulled it off as well as he thought he could. But he won the Academy Award for this. So
Not only that, after 3 consecutive losses. He was nominated and lost for Streetcar Named Desire, nominated and lost for Viva Zapata the next year, nominated and lost for Julius Caesar, and then finally nominated and won for On the Waterfront. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And today we're going to talk about the big blockbuster from 1954. Won a bunch of awards. It's On the Waterfront.
Yeah, so Terry Malloy, a former prize fighter turned longshoreman, begins to realize he may have taken the wrong side in the dispute between would-be workers and the corrupt union head, Johnny Friendly. When forced to confront his choices, he finds that he's making new enemies on both sides.
So this is directed by Elia Kazan, who got into the industry by producing and writing A Streetcar Named Desire, the play, based on Tennessee Williams. He directed and produced the play, and then when they turned into movie, he got his hands into there, and then the movie Streetcar Named Desire was a big hit. And from there, that's when Elia Kazan got into the industry. He's kind of noted for starting the method acting process.
Yes.
Also, there's a lot of controversy around the history behind him because he did name friends' names during the Un-American Activities Committee, which soured a lot of people. That's why if you see when you get a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Oscars, there's not a lot of people stood up and applaud him. But people understand his work and contributions, but for that, they still haven't really given a lot of it praise. But he did come out there with Martin Scorsese and Stanley Kubrick. Always give praise to Elia Kazan film contributions.
Yeah, I mean, there can always be that two things. You can admire one thing about somebody and not like them in the same way, or vice versa. Complicated people make complicated movies, I guess.
Right, exactly. And so he knows how to navigate Brando's interest into something, which is you almost have to go sideways. You have to flank him. You can't go direct him, say, do this.
Yeah.
It's almost like he enticed, Frank Sinatra's interested in doing this because he's from Hoboken, and we're going to film it from Hoboken. And then Marlon, that's good. And then he think about it. And he's like, well, you want to test screen Paul Newman and John Woodward, do some test screening and see if they have chemistry for this movie.
And Newman was a relative unknown at that time, so it's kind of funny thinking of the what would be, you know.
So then Marlon's looking at it and he's like, well, they have good chemistry. Maybe I want to do this.
Yeah.
So, and that's how he came out. And, of course, soured Frank Sinatra because he really invested, lobby hard for the role. He's from Hoboken, New Jersey. And he wanted this. And then it's become kind of the catalyst of not really a friction, but Marlon and Frank didn't really get along very much. They were never really in the same room together.
Yeah, Marlon and a lot of people didn't get along all that well. To be honest. You know, he had that whole thing in his contract for this movie where he said he had to be done by 4 p.m. every day. So whether or not you're still filming, I'm going home. And that caused a rift between him and Rod Steiger.
Very famous,
when they filmed the scene in the back of the cab, the famous scene, one of the most famous scenes of all time. For the Steiger parts where he's speaking, Brando wasn't there. And Steiger always kind of got a little pissed off about that because he said, I was there for his half. You know, I was there to read lines to him, but I'm reading some aides lines read to me, and it's frustrating.
So if you didn't know Hollywood, when this camera's just on one person and the other actor says those lines, usually you want the real actor to do it.
Yeah.
And kind of try to act out the lines even though the camera's not on them. And like Marlon refused to be there for the whole process.
That was a big thing. I mean, even just we talked about in our episode on Dress to Kill. Join the Patreon to get access today. We checked with our Dress to Kill episode about how Michael Caine wasn't in most of the shots that he needed to be in receiving information, but he went and sat down and received it anyway so that he could offer up, that physical presence. It's important.
So it's on site. A lot of what we would seem it seems right now, obviously forced acted. We know that Marlon's acting, but at the time it looks so organic. It looks so he's not acting. And Carl Marlon, and that's the other kernel that we talked about. Eli to get Marlon interested was he always used Carl Malden as the base.
Yeah,
which is interesting because Carl Malden's character is almost the conscientious character of the whole movie.
Yeah, the pious one.
Pious one. But it's like that contrast. Somehow Carl and Marlon got along. In fact, when Marlon directed his one and only movie, I think One-Eyed Jacks, he recruited Carl to be part of it as well. So they do have a get along as well.
Yeah, maybe two of the only people that got along together that made the whole film.
This is written by Bud Schulberg. He also wrote the screenplay for A Face in the Crowd, What's Shaking Sammy's Run, and then there's another one. He also was a sports writer, accomplished sports writer for Sports Illustrated. But with those three scripts, including On the Waterfront, he always likes to, with his writing, go depth through certain areas. Like Face Crowd would talk about politics, inside the nature of politics. Here, this is inside the mob on the waterfront. You get a really in-depth, almost like you know it.
Yeah, and we begin with a character that we're not supposed to like. You know, and that's not an easy way to start a narrative, is with all characters we aren't supposed to like. You know?
Like even the vernacular. So almost like Bud was almost part of this, and he can actually relate to it. With the scripts, because you get the vernacular, you get the way how they dress. You know, I'm not talking to anybody. You know, cops or anything. Yeah. Or pigeons.
Oh yeah, the pigeons and the hawks, if you.
So cinematography is Boris Kaufman. He did a lot of work later with Sidney Lumet, when early works of Sidney Lumet. So like Splendor, but he will go back and work with Eli with the most. I consider the most boring film ever made, Splendor of the Grass. Oh my God!
It doesn't sound all that enticing either.
It's Warren Beatty and think Natalie Wood.
But does it look good?
Oh, it looks good, but it's so boring. It is for me. If you have another one that's boring, for me, it's the most boring film ever.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll always throw Topaz at you, but yeah, Kaufman did 12 Angry Men with Lumet, which we talked about before, and also I think the first thing I saw that Kaufman had been a cinematographer for was La Adelante, which was one of the rare films from Jean Vigo.
Yes.
Who only made, I think, 4 films total, including shorts.
Yeah.
And I was aware of that one with Kaufman, so jumping ahead many decades and seeing kind of the difference that's changed there too is quite interesting.
And so you have a lot of other people that started. It peppered in with a lot of people that start with their careers, because obviously the big stars are Marlon and Carl. But this introducing Eva Marie Saint. This is her first film. Yeah. She actually won.
Oscar winner, yes.
Oscar winner for her first film. But also you get Rod Steiger. He's starting out. And Lee J. Cobb.
Can I tell you something that's funny about Steiger was I missed him completely. Didn't realize that was him. I'm more, of course, aware of Steiger
because
like
he's
Mars Attacks '90s, bald,
he's
angry
out.
Old man.
He's usually out, right?
So when I saw his name in the movie, I saw that and I finished the movie and I said, was he in that? And I stopped and I was like, maybe there's a different guy. Maybe I'm thinking of a Steiger and this is Steiger or something like that. And I had to go back and I was like looking him up to figure out the photo, and then finally realized, like, oh, he's Charlie. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's Terry's brother.
Thank you for looking nothing like you do in the '90s when I became aware of him.
Yeah. So there's Rod Steiger and Lee J. Cobb, but also if you watch carefully, you'll see Martin Balsam, Pat Hingle too.
See, and I missed Pat Hingle. I saw Herman Munster.
I
played Herman Munster. Yeah. I saw him in the film. He's hard to miss. I saw Balsam, of course. Because it's hard. I've got that shot of him falling in Psycho, like, burned in my memory. So when I see him, I immediately start.
But he was
back
also in 12 Angry Men too.
Yeah. 2 jurors together hanging out. A lot of coincidental kind of people that were in kind of the fray here, of course, because we have 2 people in this film who both played parents to Superman.
Oh my God.
Brando was, of course, Kal-El, and then Eva Marie Saint played Ma Kent in Superman Returns.
You would find.
I always think it's funny. I'm not like the biggest defender of superhero cinema. I'm not the guy who's like it's the pinnacle. I think it's good stuff, but I always tend to find that like you can find any relationship between people based on a superhero movie because there's like 30 a year. So
there's a lot of elements to this script that you would kind of nowadays regard as cliches. You know, the loner boy like Terry who. Pigeons are my friends or something like that. He's an ex-boxer. It's almost like
tough guy with the soft birds.
It's very much, I would say, this Terry Maloney is very much a lot of Rocky in him.
Yes.
Yeah.
I kept thinking about Rocky purely because it almost felt like this movie could have been a different take on Rocky 2. You know, after he fights Apollo and he comes home and then he decides to break up the union that he's been supporting the whole time. Like, it felt very akin to that film, and of course this one came years before, but
especially how awkward he talks to Eva Marie Saint.
True.
I love that line. He goes, "Yeah, I had my hair braided. Yeah, I look like a hunk of rope."
Yeah.
When it's that vernacular dialogue, I don't know, those nuns that we thought they were going to beat an education out of me, but I outfoxed them.
Yep. Sure showed them.
I sure showed them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the dialogue of the film. I really loved, even Carl Malden. I'm just a regular potato eater. Yeah. I'm Irish, but you don't say I'm just an Irish nobody, but you just say I'm just a regular potato eater. But isn't this the way it's supposed to be?
Yeah, there's a lot of dialogue meat in this film. Is that I don't want to say there's no wasted dialogue, because I think there's stuff that of course is not necessary, but it's good. It's good dialogue where it's like it adds something to the flavor of the mix, if you will. Beautifully written character interactions.
And how they say it too.
Yeah, and how the performances are made. It's almost as if Bud knew who was the intended cast for the film.
Yeah.
And maybe not all of them fit that role what they got in, but there was that intention going into it, which was quite something.
But yeah, it's Carl Malden, break ball games, break my heart.
Yeah.
Ball games. I mean, it's hard to write it, but then Carl's gonna say it, right?
Yeah, Malden is he's got some chops that I think we don't talk about him today in the way that he has owned every single film role. And he's worked in all sorts of stuff, from this film. My most memorable Carl Malden performance is, of course, in The Cat of Nine Tails with Dario Argento. So a completely different character altogether. But, man, he just always oomphs everything up a little bit more. And he surprises, because he's always playing kind of boring seeming
You would think some guy's just going to play an Irish priest.
Yeah.
It'll be
and I've come to realize Carl Malden is, in this time period is almost like how I refer to James Cameron as a director, which is like I never doubt when I see Malden in the film anymore. I used to. I don't anymore.
No. But it's the way they talk.
Yep.
Yes. And the action. You think a movie like this is going to be slow, but it's that action pace right away, especially with Joey.
Yeah.
Execution of Joey.
It's a great opening scene to the film. We had our join the Patreon to check out our top 5 opening scenes. This is a great opening that we did not include on our list. So
well, you kind of forget about it because you have a great second act, and you don't really know where Terry's going to go with until finally he testifies.
Yeah.
But he does it so awkwardly. Like, can I wait the question? No, it's this guy. Well, can I ask you the question first? But it's that guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't talk about the opening because there's that level of iconography to other scenes where they're more important to the narrative. I mean, there's the scene down at the docks. There's the scene in the cab. There's the scene in that part where they're the guys are going through trying to get information and everyone kind of like turns the other way. It's almost like they're dancing out of the room because they realize someone's going to bust the party.
So for me, when I've seen this movie many times, the ending never really made sense to me, that he gets the beating out of Johnny Friendly. But it's metaphorically that he had to go through the crucible to realize that he's part of the guys. He's not part of them anymore.
Yeah.
He gets his beating. That they now says, I'm with you guys, you can follow me.
Yes.
Because I never understand that ending until it's explained. I could visually see it, that he is no longer part of the mob. He had to go down there to get the beating, to tell everybody, I'm now part of your group now.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with you that the first, as I finished the movie yesterday, I was like, yeah, that didn't sit with me. And having a little bit of time after that, came to the idea of, well, he's former, we all like to think of ourselves in the most perfect light, that we are all still as strong as we were at our strongest. He's not that way anymore. He's been neutered in a sense, by the beatings he's had from life. So there's that. Then of course, Johnny Friendly doesn't exactly play fair either. He throws a couple other guys in there too.
No, that's a good thing, because in the beginning, in the movie, Rod Steiger, Johnny Friendly goes, what's your problem with your brother Terry? And Charlie goes, there's too much Marcus of Queensberry in him. And if you didn't know boxing, that is the rules they obey for boxing. So no below the belt and everything. So it's a circumnavigate way to explain that Terry always likes to obey the rules.
Yeah.
Where these guys are mobsters, they don't understand, right?
Yeah, he goes into a fight expecting a one-on-one. Regardless of anything else. I mean, that's why he eggs him on. He's right. He wants to get that one-on-one action, and maybe he would have a better chance of that. But again, time makes fools of us all. The younger Terry probably would have held a bigger stamp but he just can't do it here.
So, before we move on to the review, I would like to mention the very famous scene Marlon Brando had. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. Now, did you know that was in this movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To be honest, I've never seen A Streetcar Named Desire, and I've never seen this film before yesterday. So going into it, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Waterfront. I'm pretty sure it is. And as the movie starts going, I'm like, yeah, okay, it is. Like, those are two movies. I'm not young Brando sufficient, I guess.
No, but it is
70s, 80s.
It's the Hamlet speech. Who am I?
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a man who's just lost his purpose.
To be or not to be.
And to realize that he's, again, I think he realizes at that point, no matter, like, I can't go any side anymore. The side I was on, I've now betrayed, and the side that I'm heading towards, everyone hates me because they assume that I'm still here. Like, I don't have a spot, anymore. And that's a heartbreaking
That's why he was
scene.
also, he talked about it, he also looked at Terry as masculine in the mob, but feminine when he's against the mob.
Yeah, there's a tenderness that he's not easily getting out. Right. And the moment, I think that's iconic to me is that moment where he's most emotional is where he's going to admit to Edie what happened to her brother, and he can't because of the horns. It's
that driving.
Yeah, like he can't even get out the emotion that he has because of, this preconceived, I'm a fighter, I'm a tough guy, I can't show any weakness. And the moment he shows weakness, it's snuffed out by the very docks that he's trying to be a part of.
Exactly.
So it's pretty cool stuff. I mean,
before we get to my favorite scene is him and Eva Marie Saint when they leave the church, and she drops her glove. And it's a great way why she stays there and listens to his BS. Yeah. Because he takes her glove and he starts playing with it, and then he even tries it on. Yeah. And then she's tried nicely, like, can I have my glove back? Yeah. But he knew that when reading the script, he needed a reason why she would stay and listen to it. And that's another reason is he would just hold on to something that she had. Maybe he didn't really know that. You don't really know if that's intentional or that's another reason to keep listening to me.
Yeah, it goes back to the Marlon Brando is and was a tremendous actor. Yeah. It's just that collaboration piece that he never wanted and never really tried for, because there was a lot of that stuff where he tried to improv lines in this movie, and Kazan and him kind of got at each other about it. Because he's feeding lines, but no one else knows what he's saying. Like, no one else is prepared to react to him.
Yeah, why don't you give me a heads up if you're going to do that?
Yeah, and especially with the things where he was gone by 4 p.m., you can't improv lines in the cab scene and then leave because we have to know what we're supposed to say, and you're not there to feed the lines. It's that constant, the collaboration makes me hate him, but he's just such a great actor, too. Yeah.
So, up next is, of course, our review of On the Waterfront. All right, there's not much I could say other than it just still maintains a fantastic thing. I love this movie. So this is your first time seeing it. So let's give it a go for you. What do you think of this movie? One Best Picture, one Best Cinematography, Best Actor, Best Actress.
I really enjoyed it. I was surprised that it did as well as it did at the Academy Awards. Not docking the movie for that, but it did very, very well. Oh, yeah. In a time period when you didn't have as many films that swept Oscars. It was a pretty big rarity to have a movie that got 8 wins and 4 nominations. I think only 2 films had done that prior. Gone with the Wind being one had gotten 8 wins, and no film had done it. Yeah, and no film had gotten more at that point. And so it's just kind of that, I didn't realize the impact that the film had in that way right at the time. It always felt to me like this movie gained its momentum later.
Yes, I think it probably did one of those grassroots campaigns. Yeah, word of mouth.
And part of it probably was that Kazan, as a director, was kind of, again, very much like Malloy. You weren't really sure where he stood on things at the time, so I'm sure that didn't affect the film's marketing very well. But, yeah, I was surprised to see it did as well as it did. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters in the film. They're ones that I don't think I realized the impact they had on me watching the movie yesterday.
Oh, like Eva Marie Saint's dad.
But thinking about them as the night went on. It's a movie that stuck with me longer than I expected it to. Yeah. Yeah, especially the dad. I didn't catch the actor's name, but the guy who plays Edie Doyle's father, he's fantastic. I really liked Pat Henning as Dugan. One of those guys that you don't realize the impact he had on you until he is impacted, if you will.
I got more holes than a Pittsburgh infield.
Yeah. There's that moment, he gets the dead guy's,
Joey's coat, jacket,
and then he dies, and they give it back to her. And you realize that impact of they don't have a good standing here. They could easily be taken out and someone else will fill their place. It's a heartbreaking thing to see people as numbers. And that's how this film portrays all these people as numbers. They're cogs in a machine. They're lemmings. They're ants serving the hill, but not being part of actually taking something home.
It's hard, especially when Carl Malden's character is the conscientious character, and you have somebody in the role of a priest who's kind of almost the morality of this.
Yeah.
You guys knock it off. And you have this very scene of him preaching at the boat, and they're throwing stuff at him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it's still it's pretty rare nowadays to have that kind of an angle. But
Yeah.
it's kind of nice. It's almost, if you look back and like kind of almost kind of refreshing.
He's pious in that way, like I mentioned earlier, where it's almost, even when the scenes where he's in darkness, there's a light shining upon him. He is the angel waiting in the wings. But the problem with a character like that, and that I think the film does a really good job of portraying, is that he is not very good at achieving his goal, because he is not willing to get his hands dirty. He's a man of faith. There's a right way to do things, and he's going to do it that way. It's not going to yield the results.
But he doesn't
wants.
say the right words either.
Yeah.
Time and faith. And she's like, somebody killed my brother. And
Yeah.
you're telling me about that? Yeah.
Yeah, the immediate reaction should not be, it should not be that way. You're not accessing people in that way. So when he's trying to sway all these dock workers, they know that we can't stand against the system. It goes back to a lot of these.
But he's ignorant to it.
Yeah.
He's not from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's putting a lot on the line to get it done, but he doesn't have the expertise to change anything. And it isn't until he forms this very unlikely, I don't even want to say friendship, but kind of a shaky truce with Terry.
Yes.
Where that they each have to get something out of this.
Right.
But
then the marker when it goes beyond is the execution of Charlie.
Yeah.
Then that's the no point of it. You can have a little bit of haggle room with everybody else, but once Charlie's removed, then you understand it's a point of no return.
Oh, exactly, yeah. And I think Steiger does a great job in that role because he is very minimalistic. And again, like we said, we know our Steiger is not usually minimalistic.
Wise up!
We expect a guy to hit some people, yeah.
I just love when he writes it. It goes right to Marlon's face. Wise up!
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the scene in the cab, and more so than even the emotional strain of Malloy's speech at that part, which is iconic, I get that. I was more invested in the give and take between him and Charlie because I didn't know how this scene was going to. I didn't know how the scene was going to end. I didn't know going into it, was Charlie going to do the job, or was he going to protect his brother? Because he plays it very dark before getting in that cab.
Exactly.
I think there's a very significant chance that we're going to get a psycho moment here, and Malloy's going to be out.
And that's why I think the movie's effective. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know if Eva Marie, if it's going to be a domestic violence right here, or what the heck? Yeah.
I'm thankful the most iconic part of the movie is not a spoiler plot point, if you will. No. It is a character moment, so it doesn't take away knowing about the scene, because you still don't know how that ride is going to end. And yeah, again, knowing Steiger, I think it's better that we know Steiger later on, because we expect him to be the bastard.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think it's required filming for my film class. I think if I had a film, for when I went to my film class, it was required viewing. I think if I had my own film class, I would have it as required viewing. Overall, it's still kind of a historic footnote of a film.
Yeah, it's a movie, again, that sticks with you, which is really nice to have, because, again, finishing the movie, I was like, that was good. And then as the night went on, just thinking about it, and I think that's what the best films do, is they leave a popcorn kernel in you that's going to pop eventually, and you're going to embrace a lot more elements of it. I look back on it today, 24 hours removed, and I think much higher of it than I thought just after finishing the movie, because it's a very simple narrative.
And for me, I always say great movies are memorable and unforgettable. And there's some things both memorable and unforgettable about this movie.
Yeah.
So.
One other thing I wanted to point out, Leonard Bernstein doing the score.
Oh, right.
This is the only non-musical that he ever did, both on and off the stage.
It's got that very jazzy tempo.
Yeah. And it's not it's a score that is not entirely like, it does not get larger than the film itself, but it fits within the narrative.
It doesn't
really
make
nicely.
It grand.
Yeah, thinking, I can't place the beat in my head right now, not watching the movie, but as I was watching it, I felt the impact of the score more so than most other films from the 50s. There was supposed to be this kind of sound quality thing back in the 50s where we were figuring out score, I think, a lot better. And I think there was a lot of improvement to the scores, because, of course, in the 30s, we didn't have score in a lot of ways.
No.
It was kind of something that would be engineered later on. Films worked really well with that.
So, have you seen On the Waterfront?
Yeah, check it out. In fact, if right now, we're recording this in November, so there's a Criterion sale. Go pick up the Blu-ray on Criterion right now, or stream it on HBO Max.
Okay.
If you get the Criterion edition, it actually has 3 different versions of the film. Just slight alterations to the frame, full size, that they did that have some very interesting ways in which they edited frames because they were experimenting with frame rate, which is kind of interesting. Something I didn't know about the film.
That makes and then just doing that experimentation makes it 2 different versions.
Yeah,
3 different versions.
Checking out that was a cool video that showed me the differences there. But check out that sweet Blu-ray from Criterion. It's a really wonderful presentation. Or stream the film now on HBO Max, and then come back here and tell us your thoughts about it. And if there's another Elia Kazan film we should cover, there's quite a few others in that filmography.
Splendor of the Grass.
We're totally
No, man.
But thank you guys for joining us. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts, and both Kai and I are D&D.